we're now going to take demand-side policies one step further, and as you will find, that a lot of what we're looking at now will be contradicting what was on the previous video. Now, we're going to be looking in a bit more detail at demand-side policies through the following prism. That nobody quite knows how the national economy works. Sometimes the best policies work, sometimes the best policies fail. Sometimes they are completely contradictory policies that might work, and that's what we're going to be having a look now. For instance, in our last video, we made one point. Let's have a look at the ADAS diagram. Refresh our memories. PL, Y equals real GDP. The real GDP is that in order for the diagram to make sense, we need to control the price of living for any inflation that's taking place. And in our last class, what we said was that if this is the AS and this is the AD, right? And let's say that we have a situation like this, LRAS, that the national economy is in a recession. Y1, and the country, thank you very much, and the country wants to, wants unemployment, reducing unemployment as a priority, then it can use a fiscal policy in order to be able to get people to spend more so that the national economy moves from Y1 to Y2, and therefore we may have a slight amount of inflation, but what's going to be happening is that because the economy has gone from Y1 to Y2, we're all happy because we've got less unemployment. That's what we actually said last lesson, right? And last video rather. And in order to be able to do that, the government can, for example, reduce taxes. Direct taxes or indirect taxes, which means that the amount of take-home pay that a person has is more than it would otherwise be. And as everybody should know who studies economics, that spending money does not make the country poor. Spending money makes the country rich because it creates more jobs, more opportunities for other people, more products, more goods and services, and that means that the economy, more people are going to be employed. That's what we said in the last video. However, so far our discussion has sort of taken the view that the way that the national economy works is that it goes on business cycles. It can go, and any policy that the government is going to be using, like for example, expansionary fiscal policy, is simply speeding up the business cycle, or if it's contractionary fiscal policy, and let's say prices, there's too much inflation, then what it will do is it will sort of, again, move the business cycle along. But we're assuming that the economy goes on the business cycle. Not all economists agree. As we saw in a previous video, Keynes, John Maynard Keynes, a British economist who was active in the 1920s and 1930s, and whose theories today still are highly influential, said that although that might have been the case in the 19th century, boom, peak, recession, trough, it certainly wasn't the case in the 20th century when there was a Great Depression in the United States. And even though there were lots of goods and services produced, prices didn't drop, and you didn't actually have, and what happened was you had mass unemployment. In other words, Keynes' view is that you cannot rely on the consumer to be able to create, to be able to promote the economy. Now, remember that last time, in fact, throughout macroeconomics, our central formula is aggregate demand equals C. Forget the X take away M for a moment, because that belongs to global economics. And let's look at C plus I plus G. Now, we have assumed for this model, like we had in our previous class, that that consumers are the key for expanding the economy. If consumers spend more money, the economy will expand. If, however, they spend less money, the economy will contract. Keynes said no, that's not the way to go. Don't reduce taxes for the following reason. If the economy is in a mess, it is the government that actually should take responsibility of managing the economy. Now, do not fall into the trap that Keynes wanted a collectivist economy. He wasn't trying to copy the then Soviet Russia. What Keynes wanted was that the government, he believed that if the government does its job well, it can actually create more money create more wealth by spending money than private people can by spending their money. Private people, argue Keynes, tend to save. If they've got more than a certain amount, they tend to save it. Governments, when they receive money, well, they never get enough money. They always complain they haven't got enough. However high the taxes are, they always think that they need more money and they have to take care of their budget by selling bonds and things like that to make up for the shortfall and borrow from other countries. But we digress. Just accept the fact that governments know their country well, according to Keynes. And their idea is that they take the money that otherwise that the consumers would spend, right, and they spend it more effectively in creating jobs than the consumer would be able to. So therefore, what is happening is that by weakening the consumer by 1 degree, right, what you're doing is you are strengthening the government, because the consumer money goes to the government, and the government can spend the money a lot better in creating jobs. That is the Keynesian theory. Let's now describe that and flesh that out. The first thing that Keynes does, right, according to Keynes, right, in order to be able to reduce unemployment, create more work, is he's got to discourage people saving money. So therefore what he's doing is the Keynesian formula. Let's move over here. The Keynesian formula is 1. The first thing he's got to do is to discourage people saving money, reduce interest on savings. Now, by reducing interest on savings, what is happening is he's actually slightly strengthening the consumer. Now, I put a dotted line where he's weakening the consumer. But he's strengthening the consumer because he's making the consumer save money. The consumer says like this: why should I save my money if I'm only getting low interest? Let me spend it. That sort of mind means he might spend it on accommodation. He might spend it on buying goods and services. He might go out to restaurants. He might do all other things that perhaps we enjoy doing. He might spend a bit more on his children's education. Right? Any of those things, or put together, in aggregate, they actually do the following thing. What they're doing is they are creating jobs for other people. Right? And so he's making the consumer more active. Right? Reduce interest on savings, which means that the consumers are spending more money. However, he also takes the view that the government can spend money far better than the consumers. And he says like this: the government has got projects to do. Firstly, it's got schools to run. Secondly, it's got hospitals to take care of. And the example that Keynes tends to give is that by improving infrastructure means things like roads, railways, public buildings, and all the necessary bits. That A, creates lots of work, and B, it creates lots of work in construction, Right? We need construction workers to advance the economy. That also creates work. And also, let's say once you've built a bridge from A to B, it means that people in A who are looking for work can go to B if there happens to be a shortage of labour. So that means that it actually increases the job opportunities. So how is the government going to get more money? And the other one is increase taxes on increasing the taxes on consumers. That's his second thing. And the third thing is, right, putting that money into government programs that advance the economy, right, and create jobs. Government creates necessary necessary work projects that employ low income people who will spend rather than save their money. See? In other words, Keynes is trying to say like this. The formula is get people to spend. Spend, spend, spend. Firstly, discourage the consumers to save. Secondly, because he believes that consumers don't spend their money as effectively as governments on their projects. Anyway, they won't be necessarily spending the money on the right things that advance the welfare of the nation. What he's going to do is he says, well, we're going to increase the taxes and we're going to use it on projects that are government run, employ lots of people, and what will all these people who were once unemployed and are suddenly receiving wages, even if it's basic wages, not going to save the money. They're going to spend the money. And who are they going? Where are they going to spend the money? They're not going to be spending the money on to people that save. They'll be going to places that more at the bottom of the market, right? That themselves, as soon as they receive the money, they're going to spend. So in other words, the money gets spent over and over and over again. This, in theory, this piece of theory is called the Keynesian multiplier. So that if, for example, let me take this off the board. Right? If, for example, some more space, they want to expand. If, for example, they want to expand the economy, and the country, for example, its road system isn't working very well. Simply prioritise improving the roads, get plenty of people spending money, and then the money goes, and then they spend the money in turn. So that, for example, let's look at it. Let's imagine that a worker receives $100 a day. Right? Let's say $100 a day for his work. Right? So therefore, the value of the money is $100. The worker decides to keep 10%, right, and spend the other 90%. So therefore, what the worker has done, so what has happened is the government has put $100 in the economy. The worker has put $90 in the economy. So therefore, the total into the economy, the total in the economy will be 190. Now, the worker then might, now let's say that he's actually spending it, and the place that he actually spends it is the local supermarket, there's the local market. Supermarkets weren't invented in Keynesian's day. And the local markets for food. Now, the people that want food, right, they're going to buy new stocks and other things, so they're going to be spending 81, right, and they might be saving 9, okay? So therefore, 190 plus 181 would be 271. So do you understand that by injecting $100 into the economy, what is going to happen is that the value of actually what is being injected into the economy is becoming greater and greater. Now, if you follow this all the way through, if you follow it all the way through, it will be that approximately $100 injected in the economy, if on average people save only 10% what they have, which is very typical, right, could mean that it can create $900. Right, and that's the total value of the government doing it. Now, if private people spend their money, they don't generally spend them in places where those who receive the money spend the money straight away. But if poor people are spending the money and have done a day's work and contributed to the economy, and they're being worth their wages, so everybody gains, right, what's going to be happening is that they're going to be creating a lot of jobs. So that $100 injected into the economy can actually produce $900 right, worth of wealth. This is called the multiplier effect. And there's another way that we can actually make it much simpler. Let's say that we inject $100. Right? How do we calculate the multiplier? Well, let's say that in this case the people decide to save 10%. Now the formula is that the multiplier is 1 takeaway 1 over 1 takeaway MPC. I'll explain that in a moment. The MPC stands for the marginal propensity to save. That means that if you receive 100 and it's 10%, your marginal propensity C is to consume. Right? So that if you receive $100 and you spend $90 and then you keep the 10, then your marginal propensity to consume, right, is 0.9, right, 90%. Now, with that, let's have a look. Right, let's assume that it's $100. So $100 is what you put in. Our multiplier, right, is 1 over 1 takeaway MPC. And the MPC is the marginal propensity to consume. Now, let's say that our multiplier is 10, let's say that 90% of what everybody receives in this particular chain is the money that they spend, and they only save 10%. Therefore, the multiplier equals 1 over 1 takeaway 0.9. 0.901, right? That means that 90% is actually being spent. Therefore, the multiplier equals 1 over 0.1. And 0.1 into 1 goes 10 times. Now, let us now multiply that by 100. If we put 100 into the economy, and the multiplier goes at 0.9, which is 10%, then it is likely that we'll be having roughly about 100, roughly about 1,000, right? 900 to 1,000, align 1 or 2 things, about 1 or 2 points, and that will be the amount that an injection of 100 will be able to effect into the economy. Now, the point that Keynes says, and this is very important, is that if you're going to rely on the consumers to spend their money, right, you will not get anything a multiplier that time. You're certainly not going to get a multiplier at 10. Right? So, therefore, the government is more effective in injecting the money, and therefore the economy would prosper. However, Keynes would also hold what happens if the economy is doing too well, and there's inflation. Then you can take the whole policy in reverse, which could mean that you would increase the interests of saving, less money in the economy, decrease the taxes on consumers, as the consumers are going to be spending less money than the government, and cut out and reduce the government projects. So it can be taken in reverse. So that's the main point about Keynes. The other things that you need to know is that Keynes' understanding of the national economy is slightly different, right, from other economists in the following way. Let's do that to be able to conclude our presentation on Keynes. The multiplier is the most important idea and is modelled right, his model for creating the multiplier with the government is very important. By the way, before I move on, of course this is particularly important during COVID, where quite a large number of governments, the US, right, for example, Israel, have actually, and Hong Kong, have actually been giving out handouts of money to people to be able to spend. Because when the businesses aren't going well, when primary consumers aren't doing well, they've actually been giving people, as well as companies, money to spend because they know that the money they're going to receive, they're not going to save. They're just going to pump it into the economy. So when the government's actually helping the economy with people's tax money, right, the government is not just giving money out. What the government is doing is it's multiplying its work, that by an injection of 100, you can actually end up with 1,000 or even more. That's the idea. However, be aware that Keynes, right, is one point we have to make quite clear. And that is that Keynes, anything that Keynes, any of Keynes's policy, right, assume the following. Okay, let's do the graph like this. I'm doing the graph typically like this because most Keynesians actually, or the extreme Keynesians, do not recognise that the first is anything other than the AS, right, and they don't call it the LRAS or the SRAS for the following reason. That according to Keynes, if the economy is at this stage, PL1Y1, and the economy is actually operating at this stage, right? Now that might appear that the economy is in recession. That's what we have. That's what we knew so far. The economy is not in recession. Because according to Keynes, the economy will stay where it is unless the government do something to be able to expand the economy. For example, if let's say the economy was once here, AD0, then times are bad and it moved to AD1. Now that could be, now it will stay at AD1 for the following reason. What happens if wages go down? Well, people won't work. You see what's happened? At AD0, it went to AD1 because simply wages go down. It won't work. Wages are sticky. And therefore the Keynesian view is that the economy will actually stay stuck where it is. It will not go boom, peak, recession, trough. Because people aren't prepared to accept lower wages when times are bad. People aren't prepared to hire out their land at lower rents. The economy is actually stuck unless the government does something about it. That was the reason why the United States was in a situation of recession, right? Or was of depression, not recession, which actually continued through the 1930s, 40s, and 50s. Because he holds that wages are sticky, which means that if things are suddenly bad, the economy won't adjust. People want their wages. Rents are sticky. The economy, people want their rents. Prices and so on. They don't go down, not according to Keynes. So that you can't expect the economy to correct itself. That will not happen. It's only when the government actually manages the economy. So to sum up, according to Keynes, we cannot rely on the national economy to take itself out of the recession. Even if people want to, right, the prices and all other things are sticky, right, and it doesn't happen, we don't get boom, peak, recession, drop, boom, peak, recession, drop. What is needed to take the country out of a recession, and this is the important thing, is affirmative government action. And those are the three things, the Keynesian formula. Number one, the idea is get people spending when otherwise they will save. Number one, reduce taxes. I'm sorry, wrongly. Raise taxes for consumers, direct taxes. The government's got more money. Number two, the government has its own projects, right, which are necessary for the nation, which employ lots of people, right, and with that taxes, the government actually designs projects and employs people. And third, just to make sure that consumers are spending, reduce the interest rates of saving so that people spend. That means that you increase the marginal propensity to consume with consumers. But what you mostly do is that you get government injections which multiply the economy and get the biggest value for tax spending. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.